My name is Scarlett Brooks, and I have a question, maybe more than one. Why was I standing in the rain, watching my only son being lowered into the ground when parents aren't supposed to outlive their children? Why did my husband, my partner of 27 years, hand me divorce papers minutes later like he was closing a deal? Why did Matthew call me days before he died, his voice trembling, saying he needed to talk about his father and the family business? And why does every memory since feel like a lie? Tell me, if this were your life, what would you do? I stood in silence, the sound of dirt hitting the casket still echoing in my ears. Rain soaked through my black dress, but I barely noticed. I had just buried my son, my entire world, and somehow the grief hadn't even settled before Gerald, my husband of 35 years, shattered what was left of me. We need to talk, he said, his hand gripping my elbow, not out of comfort, but control. His voice was flat, almost impatient. I thought he was breaking under the pressure. Instead, he was planning an escape. Not now, I whispered. Please, Gerald, not now. But he insisted, because to him it was the perfect time. With our son gone, he believed the strings tying us together had snapped. No witnesses, no distractions, no consequences. He led me to the car like it was just another errand. There, fogged windows blurred the outside world as he pulled out a manila envelope. I held it with shaking hands, and the moment I read the words at the top, petition for dissolution of marriage, something inside me cracked. What is this? I asked, though I already knew. He didn't blink. Now that Matthew's gone, there's nothing keeping us together. I'm taking over the business. The house is legally mine. The house. Matthew's house. The one we'd moved into to help after his divorce. The one filled with his things, his presence, his memories. And now Gerald was claiming it, like it was property on a ledger, like Matthew hadn't even mattered. You can stay until I return, he added. 3 weeks. Think of it as a grace period. I stared at him. A vacation? My voice cracked. Our son just died. He nodded, like I'd confirmed a weather report. Life goes on, mine will go on, without you. And just like that, I saw him clearly for the first time. The face I had loved for decades was now a stranger's. Cold, calculated, hollow. There were no tears in his eyes, no grief in his words, just logistics, just control. When we got home, Matthew's home, he went upstairs to pack for his tropical getaway. I sat alone in the kitchen, divorce papers spread across the table like a slap in the face. The only sound was the ticking clock. No laughter, no footsteps, no future. My son was gone. My husband wanted me gone. And at 66, I was standing in the ruins of the life I thought I'd built. That night, as the rain tapped gently on the windows, sleep refused to come. I stared at the ceiling in the guest room, grief gnawing at my insides. But buried beneath that sorrow, something else began to burn. Anger. Cold, simmering anger. 3 days before Matthew's accident, he'd called me, said he needed to talk, said it was about his father and the business. That conversation never happened, but now I couldn't stop wondering, what had he been about to say? What had he found? And why was Gerald so eager to vanish? 3 days? That's all the time there was between Matthew's call and his crash. I replayed his voice in my mind over and over, tight, nervous, unlike him. Mom, can we have lunch next week? I need to talk to you. It's about Dad and the business. At the time, I thought maybe it was stress. Maybe father and son had clashed over some decision. Now, I wasn't so sure. Now, I heard fear in his voice. That memory kept circling back to me, refusing to rest, haunting every corner of my mind. What had he discovered? What had he seen? I began to question everything. The timing, Gerald's sudden detachment, his cold calmness at the funeral. And then there was the envelope, already prepared and waiting for me in his jacket pocket, as if he knew there would be no more lunches, no more chances to talk. That's when I remembered the safe. It wasn't anything unusual at the time, just one of those precautionary things families do. After his divorce, Matthew had asked me to be his emergency contact, gave me the combination to the wall safe in his office. Just in case, he had said. Back then, I thought it was responsible. A little morbid, maybe, but responsible. Now it felt like something more, like a lifeline he had quietly handed me, not knowing how much I'd need it. The next morning, after Gerald left for his vacation, I walked through the quiet, still house. Every creak of the floorboards sounded different, heavier somehow. Matthew's office still smelled faintly of his cologne. His books, his notebooks, even his favorite mug sat untouched, like he might walk through the door at any second. I opened the closet, moved aside his neatly hung suits, and there it was, bolted to the wall, matte black steel, the safe. My hands shook as I turned the dial. Right, left, right again. Click. Inside were folders, thick ones, labeled in financial shorthand I barely understood. But it was what sat on top that stopped my breath. A sealed envelope, my name written in his handwriting. One word, Mom. I stared at it, frozen. I wasn't ready to know, but I couldn't keep pretending I didn't need to. Inside was a letter and a USB drive. Mom, if you're reading this, something's happened to me, or I've finally gotten the courage to tell you the truth. That line alone nearly broke me, but I kept reading. Gerald, my husband, had been siphoning money from the business, offshore accounts, a villa in Costa Rica, and a name I hadn't heard in years, Diane Monroe, his former secretary. Matthew had known, he had investigated, and now he was gone. My fingers tightened around the pages. A storm was forming inside me. Grief, fury, disbelief. But more than anything else, I needed to know everything. And that USB drive? It wasn't just numbers, it held proof. The USB drive felt cold in my hand, small, unassuming, yet somehow heavier than it should have been, like it knew the secrets it carried. I walked over to Matthew's desk, where his laptop still sat beneath a faint layer of dust. My heart pounded as I plugged it in, every part of me bracing for what I was about to find. It didn't take long. The screen blinked to life and the folders loaded. Organized, labeled, prepared. My son hadn't just been suspicious. He had been methodical. There were documents, spreadsheets, scanned bank transfers, and something that stopped me in my tracks. A folder labeled audio. I wasn't a financial expert, but even I could recognize the patterns. Large sums of money moved quietly from the company's primary account into smaller foreign-based accounts. Panama, the Cayman Islands. Properties listed under Gerald's name. Transactions that didn't add up. And the villa. Beachfront, secluded, paid for in full. All in Gerald's name. None of it shared. None of it legal. Then I clicked on the first audio file. It opened with Matthew's voice, steady but strained. Dad, these transfers don't make sense. They aren't taxes. They aren't investments. Where is this money going? Gerald's reply sent a chill down my spine. His tone was clipped, sharp. You're looking at this all wrong, son. I built that business from the ground up. I'm entitled to secure my future. Matthew pushed back. What about Mom's future? She's part of this too. Gerald's voice turned dismissive, almost cruel. Your mother's always been content letting others make the hard decisions. That won't change now. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. The same cold indifference I'd heard at the cemetery. It was here too, in his voice, his words, years of belittling me wrapped in polite tones. I'd mistaken it for concern. But now I heard it clearly for what it was, control masked as protection. I played another file. This one was darker. Gerald speaking vaguely about starting fresh, about eliminating obstacles. It might have sounded metaphorical once. Now, after reading Matthew's letter, it sounded like a warning, or worse, a threat. My stomach turned. Alone, it could all be coincidence. Together, it painted a picture I didn't want to see. One of a man who was willing to erase anything or anyone that got in the way of his second chance at life. I couldn't sit with it alone. I needed someone who wouldn't think I was losing my mind. So I called Linda. She arrived within the hour, her eyes filled with concern. I handed her the letter and watched her expression shift as she read. Shock, then rage, then fear. That man is dangerous, she whispered. I nodded. We need help. Someone who understands this. She didn't hesitate. Mark, her son-in-law, an attorney who specialized in financial crimes, arrived that afternoon. By nightfall, he was sitting at Matthew's desk, sifting through the files. His voice was low, grave. This isn't just unethical, he said. It's criminal. And that's when we knew. We weren't just uncovering secrets. We were building a case. Mark stayed up late into the night, flipping through documents, taking notes, his brow furrowed with every page. He barely spoke, except to ask a question here or there about names, dates, or company roles. But I could tell. What he was seeing disturbed him. This goes beyond fraud, he finally said. He's been siphoning money systematically, hiding it offshore, using aliases in some cases. But what really concerns me is the tone in those audio files. He clicked through several more, each one darker than the last. One recording made my blood run cold. It was Matthew's voice again, firm but clearly on edge. Dad, you're lying. This is theft. You've been laundering money. Gerald's reply? Cold. Dismissive. You're not thinking long-term, Matthew. You're emotional. That makes you weak. Matthew didn't back down. I've already spoken to someone about this. If you don't come clean, I will. A pause. Then Gerald's voice, low and unmistakably threatening. Careful. Obstacles don't last long in my world. Obstacles. That same word again. The same one I'd read in Matthew's letter. The same one that had made my skin crawl. Mark paused the recording, his eyes narrowing. That's not metaphor, Scarlett. Not in this context. Linda stepped into the room, her face pale. He said the same thing to me once, about a coworker he wanted fired. He used the exact phrase. The room fell into silence. We all knew what we were thinking, but no one said it out loud. Had Matthew been killed? Not just lost in some tragic accident, but silenced? Mark stood, pacing. We need to document everything, every audio file, every financial record, and we need someone in law enforcement we can trust. Linda nodded. I know someone, Detective Samantha Blackwell, state level. She's handled sensitive financial cases before, and she's discreet. By the next morning, we were seated at Linda's dining table, laying everything out in front of Detective Blackwell. She listened closely, asked pointed questions, took notes in a small leather-bound journal. When we finished, she folded her hands and looked at me. These are serious allegations, she said. Financial crimes, yes, but if there's even a chance your son's death wasn't accidental, we need to proceed carefully. Your husband has a head start, and he'll be watching his back. I nodded, heart thudding. But we have a window, she continued. He said he'd be back in a week. That gives us time to act, and a way to get him to let his guard down. She looked at me. We want you to stay in the house. When he returns, we'll have surveillance set up. Audio, video, the works. But you'll need to play a role. I stared at her. You want me to pretend? Yes, she said. Be the version of you he expects. Let him think he's won. If he believes you're broken, he may get careless. I swallowed hard. I had buried my son. Now I had to wear grief like a mask, to expose the man who may have taken him from me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. After Detective Blackwell left, the house felt heavier, full of ghosts, questions, and the weight of everything I just agreed to. I was no longer just grieving. I was preparing for a confrontation with the man I'd once trusted with my life, a man who might have ended our sons. The next morning, while organizing some of Matthew's paperwork, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Hello? A woman's voice, soft, nervous, but deliberate. Mrs. Brooks, my name is Angela Dawson. I used to work with your son at the accounting firm. I think we need to talk. Her voice trembled, and then, it wasn't an accident. Matthew's car crash. I don't believe it was, and I can prove it. My knees nearly gave out. I clutched the table for balance, heart thudding in my chest. What are you saying? Not over the phone, Angela whispered. Please, meet me tomorrow. Rosie's Cafe on Maple, back booth near the exit, 10 a.m. I think someone's been watching me. She hung up before I could say another word. I called Linda immediately. Her answer was firm. I'm coming with you, and I'm bringing Mark. The next morning, the three of us arrived at Rosie's Cafe early. It was a strange kind of irony. Gerald had proposed to me at this very cafe, in this very booth, decades ago. Now I was here to unearth the truth about the man I married, and possibly the murder of my son. Angela arrived on time. Early 30s, auburn hair in a tight bun, eyes darting to every corner of the room. Mrs. Brooks, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thank you for coming. You said Matthew's death wasn't an accident, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, then pulled a folder from her bag. Matthew suspected your husband. He confided in me, asked me to keep backup records. Financial documents, yes, but also photos. She laid them out on the table. Black and white, grainy, but clear. One image made Mark sit up straight. The brake line, cleanly severed. That's not wear and tear, Mark said immediately. That's deliberate. Angela nodded. He had his car serviced just 2 weeks before. Everything was fine. Then suddenly, brake failure on a sharp curve. He was careful, meticulous. This wasn't coincidence. Did you take this to the police? Linda asked. I did, Angela replied. I spoke with Detective Ramirez. The next day, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing taken, except my laptop and the original files. I felt cold. The implication was clear. There's more, Angela said quietly. The night before his accident, Matthew called me, said he confronted your husband again. He said Gerald made a threat, not directly, but, she swallowed. He used the words removing obstacles. That phrase again, in the journal, on the recordings, and now from Angela. Matthew had become an obstacle, and obstacles don't last long. By the time we left the cafe, I felt like the ground beneath me no longer existed. Matthew hadn't just uncovered financial fraud. He hadn't just feared for the company or been betrayed by his father. He had become a threat, an obstacle. And Gerald? He had a pattern, a strategy. Silence, erase, move on. Angela's evidence had shifted everything. We returned to Linda's house in silence, the air thick with realization. When Mark made the call to Detective Blackwell, his voice was calm, but his jaw was tight with fury. She arrived within hours. We gathered everything: Matthew's letter, the USB files, the audio recordings, Angela's photos, the story of the brake line, and now the break-in at Angela's apartment. It was no longer just suspicious, it was criminal, and possibly fatal. Detective Blackwell reviewed it all with a razor-sharp focus. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, wrote notes, and nodded occasionally. When she finally looked up, her expression had shifted from curiosity to something colder. Resolve. This is bigger than I expected, she said. Financial crimes are one thing, but if there's credible evidence suggesting foul play in your son's death, we have a duty to act. She turned to me. And Mrs. Brooks, we need you. I stared at her. You want me to confront him? Not directly, she said. We want you to play along. Let him think you're broken, confused, waiting. The more comfortable he feels, the more likely he'll reveal something, especially if he thinks he's still in control. The thought made my stomach turn. Pretend to be weak. Pretend to trust. Pretend to grieve like I hadn't seen behind the curtain. But he's coming back in a few days, I said. He expects me out of the house. That's our window, she said. We want to wire the home. Audio, video, the works. We'll monitor everything. All you have to do is stay calm and follow the script. I hesitated. He won't suspect anything? That's up to you, she replied gently. but I believe you can do it. You're not just a mother mourning her son. You're the only one who can give us what we need. That night, I sat alone in Linda's study, staring at an old photo of our family, Matthew's college graduation. Gerald's arm was around him, smiling, proud. Looking at it now made me sick. Had it all been a performance? Had he been planning this for years? By dawn, I'd made my decision. I called Detective Blackwell. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll face him." The next day, the surveillance team entered Matthew's house. They were careful, efficient. Cameras behind vents, microphones in lights and furniture. When they left, the house looked untouched. The day after, I returned, just as Gerald expected, still grieving, still waiting. But I wasn't the same woman he thought he left behind. I was ready. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Matthew's room, soft and golden. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at a woman I barely recognized. Silver streaks framed my face. My eyes were lined with grief, but something else stared back. Steel. I wasn't broken. I wasn't scared. I was ready. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Flight landed early. Be home in 1 hour. Have your things ready." Gerald. I texted Detective Blackwell immediately. Her reply came seconds later. "Officers in position. Remember the plan. Stay calm." I dressed carefully. Plain sweater, familiar earrings, soft shoes. The version of me he'd expect. Quiet, compliant, still mourning. I slipped the heavy pen recorder into my pocket. Not because I didn't trust the police, because I wanted my own copy, my own truth. At exactly 8:17 a.m., I heard his car in the driveway, a door slam, keys in the lock, and then he walked in, tanned, relaxed, dressed in linen like he'd just returned from paradise. He looked at me like I was furniture. "Scarlett," he said flatly, dropping his suitcase. "You're still here?" "I needed more time," I replied, voice low, eyes down. He moved through the house like it was his, touched Matthew's books, looked over old photographs. It made my skin crawl. "Have you signed the papers?" he asked casually. "Not yet." He sighed like I was a stubborn child. "I don't know what you think you're doing by dragging this out. You're only making things harder on yourself." I didn't answer. I let the silence speak. Then, finally, I asked the question I had rehearsed 100 times. "Why did you do it on the day of our son's funeral?" His face didn't even twitch. "There's never a good time. Matthew's passing just made the separation simpler." I stared at him. "Did you have anything to do with his death?" That stopped him. For a split second, just one, his eyes widened. Then he recovered. What an absurd thing to say. "He told me he was worried," I said. "He found the offshore accounts, the Costa Rica property, the transfers. He confronted you." Gerald's face darkened. "You've been going through my things?" "No," I said calmly. "I went through Matthew's." He stepped toward me. "You don't understand the first thing about any of this." "I understand enough. The phrase, removing obstacles. You said it, over and over again. I heard it in the recordings." His mask cracked. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I think I do," I said, pulling the pen recorder from my pocket. "You forgot one thing, Gerald. Matthew wasn't afraid of you. And now, neither am I." His face contorted with rage. He lunged. His hand grabbed my arm, twisted hard. I stumbled, fell. The recorder clattered across the floor. But before he could reach it, "Police! Hands where we can see them!" The door burst open. Detective Blackwell entered, gun drawn. Officers swarmed. Gerald froze. In seconds, he was cuffed, his rights read. His eyes locked on mine as they dragged him away. "This isn't over," he hissed. But I knew the truth. It already was. That night, I sat in Linda's garden, the air cool against my skin, silence ringing louder than any words could. Gerald was gone, arrested, exposed, stripped of the control he'd held for decades. But peace didn't come immediately. It couldn't. Not with what I'd just lived through. Just after sunset, my phone rang. It was Detective Blackwell. "We found something else," she said, her voice steady but cautious. "You need to come to the station tomorrow." The next morning, I walked into a small, sterile office where Blackwell was waiting with another man, a sharply dressed professional with tired eyes. "Scarlett, this is Nathan Reynolds. He's with the insurance fraud division." He nodded politely. "In the course of reviewing your husband's financials," he said, "we found something unexpected, a third life insurance policy." I blinked. "On who?" Reynolds looked directly at me. "You." My breath caught. "What?" I asked quietly. He slid a file across the desk. "It was taken out 5 years ago. You were listed as the insured, Gerald as the beneficiary. The payout? $2 million. "I'm alive," I said slowly, not fully processing. Blackwell leaned in, her eyes sharp. "We don't think you were meant to be." Nathan opened another file. "When we searched Gerald's luggage after the arrest, we found a vial of potassium chloride. If administered correctly, it could mimic a heart attack. It wouldn't show up on a basic autopsy." The room spun. Matthew hadn't just been an obstacle. I had been one too. He hadn't planned to leave me quietly. He planned to eliminate me, retire on the stolen money, start over with someone new. Everything, his coldness, the vacation, the timing, it all made sense now. Matthew died because he got too close, and I was supposed to be next. I left the station in a daze, my feet moving without direction. That night, I stood alone on Linda's porch, looking up at the stars. They shimmered, distant and indifferent, but I felt something new in my chest. Not fear, not sorrow, but fire. I had survived. He had planned my death, just as surely as he'd orchestrated Matthew's. But I was still here. And now, I had a choice. 3 months later, Gerald stood trial. He was convicted on all counts: first-degree murder, financial fraud, and attempted murder. Life without parole. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. Instead, I spent that day in a classroom, a design class at the community college. I was 66, the oldest student in the room, but I felt younger than I had in years, rebuilding. I used part of the settlement, Gerald's seized assets and Matthew's life insurance, to start over. A modest apartment, a new phone, a small nonprofit I now worked with that helped older women find stability after loss. One night, I hosted a small gathering. Linda, Mark, Angela, even Detective Blackwell. We toasted to Matthew. "To the son who protected me," I said, "even after he was gone. And to the woman who found her strength," Linda added, lifting her glass. As the city lights flickered below my balcony, I realized something. This wasn't just closure. It was my beginning. Sometimes you don't know how strong you are until survival is your only choice. I never imagined I'd face betrayal so deep, or grief so heavy, but standing in the ruins of everything I thought I knew, I didn't fall. I fought. I uncovered the truth about my husband. I honored my son, and I found a strength I didn't know I had. Not every ending is a collapse. Sometimes it's a rebuild. Today, I live a quieter life. Modest, simple, mine. I spend my time helping women who've been left behind or knocked down. Women like me. And every morning, when I open my eyes, I whisper a quiet thank you to Matthew for trusting me, for preparing me, for giving me the strength to finish what he started. His story didn't end in silence. It ended in justice. And mine? It's just beginning. Now it's your turn. Do you think justice was truly served? What would you have done in Scarlett's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if stories like this make you think, feel, or sit on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Until then, stay curious, stay sharp, and remember, sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths.